Well, welcome everybody to Cultural Humility, Intentionality, and Vulnerability, the vital ingredients for engaging diverse communities provided by the PA Care Partnership in association with the Office of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services, which is OMSAS. At any time during the presentation, please type your questions into the Q&A feature, which you will find by running your mouse along the bottom of the Zoom screen. Today's moderators are myself, Jamal Ford, and Nancy Massey from the PA Care Partnership. And with that, I will turn it over to Nancy.
Thank you, Jamal. We are so excited to have Dr. Esther Castillo with us today. And first, I'm going to tell you a little bit about what to expect in our presentation today. In our increasingly diverse society, learning how to engage with communities of different backgrounds becomes essential know-how for many practitioners and community workers. When it works, community engagement can help build trust, overcome a scarcity mentality, and promote equity for historically marginalized groups. This webinar will discuss cultural humility, intentionality, and vulnerability, and why they are vital ingredients for inclusive and equitable community engagement with patients, clients, and community members. Dr. Castillo will provide concrete examples of how to apply these concepts in diverse community settings. Thank you all for joining us today. Our speaker is Dr. Esther Castillo. She is a DEI practitioner, community builder, storyteller, and advocate working on issues around radical justice and health equity across marginalized communities in Philadelphia. Her cross-sector collaboration with community-based organizations, health agencies, and government departments directly led to a successful COVID-19 vaccine campaign that helped over 5,000 immigrants with limited English proficiency get vaccinated in Philadelphia. Dr. Castillo was also a winner of the Good Pitch Local Philadelphia competition in 2021 and used the grant awarded to produce a short documentary, Healing Asian American, to spread awareness about the persistent but unseen racism faced by Asian Americans. I'm looking forward to seeing this soon. She also co-founded Blasian Solidarity. Blasian means an individual of both Black and Asian heritage. With community organizer, it inspired many across the nonprofit and government sectors to collaborate and partner with the local Black and Asian communities. Currently, she serves as the Director of Racial Equity, Storytelling, and Community Impact at the Office of Community Empowerment and Opportunity in the city of Philadelphia, where she leads the integration of racial equity into governmental operations and community engagement. Dr. Castillo.
Okay, hello everyone. I see folks typing in and telling us where you come from. I'm really enjoying reading them. So if you can keep it coming, thanks so much. And I'm gonna start my presentation now. Can you all see it?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so welcome.
Just to let you know, Esther, you are on your control screen.
Okay, I just swapped it and then now I need to swap it back. Does it work now?
Yep, there you go.
Awesome.
And
okay, all right.
you have some black boxes on your side. If you can move those off of the screen, I'm not sure exactly what those boxes are.
Does it work now?
Yep.
Awesome. Okay, yeah, it's always something I can't quite figure out with the double screen. So thank you for your help, Jamal. So thank you for coming today. You are at Cultural Humility, Intentionality, Vulnerability. Three things that I find extremely, extremely important when engaging diverse communities. So before I start, just a few things about my current workplace. I know some of my coworkers are here. So if you're here, just tell me in the chat. So I'm from the Office of Community Empowerment and Opportunity at the City of Philadelphia. We are a community action agency in Philadelphia, and some of the work that we do include benefit access, financial empowerment, housing security, and workforce development. And later on, I think Nancy is going to share a list of resources so you can learn more about the work of our office. So today's agenda, before we talk about what community engagement is, I'm going to touch upon diversity. Also, of course, talking about these 3 things that are in the title of the talk. And I want to just give 1 or 2 examples of how we can actually apply these seemingly abstract concepts into the work that you do. And if you can also, thank you so much for letting me know where you're from, but if I can get a sense of like what field you are in, if you're in a health field or you're with government or nonprofit, that would kind of give me an idea of what lens you are looking into, and through these lens, it will help me. Okay, so diversity. Thank you so much. I see some folks who are in education, health, behavioral health, okay, mental health, okay, public health reentry, that's great. Okay, so a lot of nonprofit people in the health field, okay, housing. Thank you so much. So now that I see it, I know that thinking about how we can engage diverse communities must be something that you all are thinking about doing, practicing. So I also want to honor your expertise. If you have something you want to share with us, please share in the chat. I know I'm the speaker today, but I truly, truly believe that we can always learn from everyone from different positions. So I also look forward to learning from you. So one quote that I like to emphasize is this quote that I heard from Arthur Chen. He is a DEI practitioner, and I followed him on LinkedIn. He said that diversity is a fact, equity is a choice, inclusion is an action, and belonging is an outcome. And I really, really like the sentence, diversity is a fact, because whether or not we choose to engage with diverse communities, we actually don't have a choice whether or not we live in a diverse society or not. We are living in a diverse society. Whether we choose to engage with them in an equitable way is a choice, right? And when we make that choice, we are actively making inclusion happen, right? And belonging, something that seems so abstract and yet everybody crave for, right, is an outcome when we successfully integrate inclusion in our everyday practices, in our professional practices. So one statistic really, really quickly, I just pulled it off from the census, is that the US is becoming increasingly racially diverse and multiracial. And the percentages of those who consider themselves white alone or just one race alone in general are decreasing. And I also want to say that when we think about diversity, we often think about race, which is so crucial because so much of equity needs to be centered on race when we think about how to practice inclusion on the ground. At the same time, so it's a both and, it's not a but, right? At the same time, we also need to think about identity in a more diverse ways, thinking about the different intersections that all of us fall into. So I have 2 lists here. I have historically dominant identities. So I have white, man, non-disabled, neurotypical, heterosexual, cisgender, native-born, citizen, wealthy, Christian. So most people fall into at least one of these categories. And then when you look at the flip side of historically marginalized identity, for example, Black, Latina, Asian, Indigenous, mixed, women, non-binary, disabled, autistic, neurodivergent, LGBTQ, immigrant, undocumented, poor, Muslim, Jewish, most people also fall into at least one of these categories. So I want to use myself as an example, right? So I identify as Asian, also mixed. I'm half Nicaraguan, half Chinese. So I am Asian and Latinx. I am queer. I'm a woman, and I have anxiety, but I'm neurotypical. I am a citizen. So even though I occupy some of the marginalized identities, I also fall into other identities where I have more privileges, right? So I want to invite all of us to think about what kind of dominant identities that you hold, right? And what kind of marginalized identities you hold. And to say all that means that, why do I say all this? Because I want us to think about diversities, identities are something really, really complex, and we can all learn from each other, no matter what we appear to be, right? And I also want to say that it is important to consider these identities because inequities still exist in our society and is still very real for most people. So it is not good enough to say, I'm just going to treat everybody equally. I'm just going to be colorblind. I'm just going to pretend that I don't see these differences. That is not good, because when we pretend that we don't see these differences, we're not understanding or acknowledging that inequities do exist in our society. And at the same time, I also want to say that all of us are more than our identities, right? So for example, I identify myself as an Asian queer woman. I'm also more than just an Asian queer woman. I am Esther. I have a set of experiences that no one else have. I come from a background that no one else know but myself, right? So are you. You have your own life stories. You have your own lived experience that only you can fully understand. So all of us have identities that we have to honor, that we want other people to see, and all of us have more than just our identity. So I just want to put it out there. Okay, so when thinking about engaging with different communities, it is also important to think about that everyone have identities, but everyone is also more than their identities, right? So I want to move into today's topic of community engagement. So what is community engagement? And when thinking about communities, to me, there are three big ingredients that makes a community a community. First of all, community has to have people. If there is no people, there's no community. Period. Okay. And in a community, there is some sort of common shared interests. Okay. And these interests might be identity based, but it might not be identity based, right? I'm thinking about, for example, the video gaming world. That these folks would come together because they have a shared interest. So it might not be based on a social identity, right? And there is some sort of trust, care, and influence that are happening within the community. So people form and maintain communities to meet these common needs and sustain shared interests. And people from the same community often have shared experience or a sense of shared histories. Members of a community have a sense of trust, belonging, safety, and caring for each other. So if you can put it in the chat, I have a question. So what communities do you belong to, right? I can tell a little bit about myself. So I see myself as a government worker, as a community organizer. I see myself as a woman. I see myself belonging to the Asian community. I also see myself as an educator, so I belong to these different communities. So if you want, please do share what communities do you belong to. Yes, my neighbor, my church, right? My neighborhood, I'm a mother as well, a woman. Thank you so much for sharing, right? Chinatown community, your sorority, dog mom, same here. I have a mutt. Thank you so much. So my point being that we all come from different communities that we deeply care about. right? There are people that we deeply care about and love in our community that makes a community a community. So we all come from some sort of communities, right? And remember that people from the same community also have multiple identities, right? So I might go into the Chinatown community, but my experience in the Chinatown community might not be the same as an Asian man who are much older, right? I consider myself a millennial, right? So a boomer Asian man might have a completely different experience when going into the same community. So it's messy. Well, it's complicated, it's complex. So that's what I'm trying to say, right? And that makes community engagement so hard. Because we are always dealing with different people, we're always interacting with different people who are their identities, but also more than their identities, right? And keep that comments going. Thank you so much. I love the fact that we are already building a community here, right? At right here, right now. I know I'm right now staring at my computer screen. I can't see anybody, but just seeing your comments allow me to kind of know a little bit more about who's in the room, right? And we're actively building a community together, and I love it. So what is community engagement, right? So we know community, and what does engaging a community means? It means being present. It means showing up, right? So just now I said that we're building a community together because we are all showing up here, right now, to learn about something we all care about, which is community engagement. And so I pulled the definition from CDC. So community engagement is working collaboratively with and through groups of people to address issues impacting the well-being of those people, right? So what is collaboration? Collaboration means that we allow everybody involved to feel ownership of the process, right? And that's why I'm asking you to please participate in the chat. Tell me more about you. Tell each other more about ourselves, right? By working together, we can feel that we are actively creating this moment together. We're actively creating this space together. And that's is what collaboration is, right? And I know I have prepared a PowerPoint, but I also want to honor the fact that you all are participating in this webinar, that you are part of a change agent of what this webinar is going to be about, right? That is collaboration, working with community and not just for community. I'm not only giving a presentation for you, I am giving a presentation with you, right? That is collaboration. So we need to get rid of savior complex, listen instead of act, and learn instead of teach, right? So again, I am just a teacher as much as I am a learner. We have, I can't look at the number right now, but I know we have a lot of, 597 people in this room, and I'm sure you all can learn, can teach so much, can teach me so much, right? So we're all learning together, coming from different backgrounds, different communities, holding different identities. So that's when cultural humility comes to play for me, because I know, how many of you have heard about cultural competency? I know that term has been thrown around a lot in so many different spaces, right? And it always seemed to me as something very, I'm just gonna ask you guys, what do you think about when you think, how does the term cultural competency make you feel? Finite amount of learning. Thank you, Ryan. It's abstract. Thanks, Christine. Sounds too easy. Thank you, Donna. Like you're doing a good job or nothing. I love it. Yes, Lori. Yes, I feel that way too. I feel like cultural competency is like I'm either competent or I am the opposite, which is incompetent. And it feels like nobody wants to feel, at least for me, I don't want to feel incompetent. So when I need to go into a space where I need to show cultural competencies, it feels like really scary for me, because either I have it or I don't have it, right? And that's why I feel like in a lot of DEI spaces, we've seen people who occupy different identities are put into leadership position because they are seen to know more about, they are seen to have more cultural competency when it comes to different spaces, right? The truth is, well, it is true, right? For me, I occupy a lot of different marginalized identities that allow me to understand more because I live it. I'm queer, I'm a woman, I'm Asian. So to me, it's just my life, right? Of course, I'm expert about my life and about people who are like me. But even for people who share the same identities as I do, we might have a different experience, right? Even when I engage with another Asian woman, they might have a different experience compared to me, right? So cultural competency can never be totally perfect. That's why I love the idea of cultural humility, because it's so much easier to achieve. It doesn't really require us to be fluent in specific cultures, right? It only requires us to be aware of what we don't know and quiet our ego, right? Be a student, be a learner, listen, and accept that we don't fully understand, and acknowledge that we don't fully understand. And we're here to listen, to see, to learn, and value differences. It also means that sometimes we just need to stop talking and take a back seat and be the observer. And I have on the right here, right, cultural humility requires a lot of self-reflection. It requires a lot of self-acceptance. It requires us to be present, to listen and learn, right? And I can tell you, I feel like we live in a society where everybody is ready to talk, right? Especially with the social media, especially with younger people. I was talking to my 7-year-old daughter, and I one time I asked her, what do you want to do when you grow up? She said, I want to be a YouTuber. I was like, okay. So I feel like we live in a day and age where everybody want to be a star because we have those platforms to do it, which is great. I think that allow more leaders from diverse backgrounds to show up, which is great, right? At the same time, I think it is also important to promote a sense of the value of listening, the value of learning. And I think it's great when people learn to fully accept themselves, because it allows us to be vulnerable, to make mistakes, to learn, to grow, right? And making mistakes is the only way forward, is the only way to learn. So I have a short video to show you. And I just want to, and Jamal, if you can let me know the sound quality, that would be great, because I don't know if I pressed all the right button.
With cultural humility, the goal is to lower your own sense of self-importance, to be open to receive other people and other people's way of life, to be present, to be listening, to be open, to see.
We are all equals and we each have skills to share. You're talking about developing a partnership. I have something to give and you have something to give. And what are we going to create from that? It's not coming in as if you have all the answers because you're at the university. And I have none of the answers because I am from a minority community.
You have to be relaxed, you have to be humble, you have to come not to a lower level, but to a level that people can understand what you're saying, can understand that you want to be there. Body language is such a big thing. If you're not comfortable, then you need to go into a community with people that are comfortable so you can see how they act, what type of clothes they wear, how they speak to people.
Whether you're a professor, or whether you're a student or a staff person, or whatever your station is, there may be this kind of sense, within our egos that we need to approach communities that we're working with a sense of knowing everything, of being the teacher. And in cultural humility, it's okay to not know, and it's okay to ask a question. It doesn't mean that you're not intelligent. It just means that you may not know something. So I think it's just important to approach folks who may have different social identities in that way, with a sense of openness, with a sense of listening and really seeing, listening to understand instead of listening to talk and teach, and occupying the space of being a true learner. I think that's important.
Please remember that we are all equals and we each have skills to share. So even though we may not have all of the book knowledge that a university student has, we still have a lot of knowledge and skills, and we're still moving forward. And we need assistance with moving forward. And there's probably a lot the university students could learn from us too.
Okay, and thank you for sharing in the chat. And I was just reading all the comments in the chat during the video, and I love the participation. I'm just so grateful that you all are so open to sharing. And I read someone said that cultural competency makes them feel anxious, and the goal here is really not to make people feel more anxious, right? It's really to make people feel more open, that we can all share and learn from each other, and that's true inclusivity, right? Okay, next point in intentionality. So I really want to put intentionality into this talk because there is a lot of discussion around doing equity work, and I don't hear intentionality too much. There seems to be this assumption that if we engage with communities that are historically marginalized, then we're automatically making a positive impact. I hear that a lot. And I want to say that community engagement does not intrinsically or automatically lead to positive impact. Just because you're talking to people who are different from you might not necessarily mean that you're making a positive impact in the world, right? Of course, cultural humility is gonna help, because at least we can make sure that we're not causing harm. This is something we really, really do not want. But not causing harm is also doesn't mean that we're moving the needle anywhere or in the right direction. So how do we make sure that we are doing something that is productive, that is positive, right? So I want to add intentionality in there. So more so the process of community engagement can be really messy. So again, it's okay to make mistakes. If you make a mistake, just say it, move on, next, don't make it about you. You know, people do not belong in a single community, and community changes over time. Just because you've known this community 10 years ago, the community might look very different today, and it's okay. And issues impact different people also differently and unevenly within a community, right? So there are, because of people having intersectional identities, you know, people have different social positions within different systems of oppression. They might experience discrimination, you know, and oppression even within a community that seemingly is homogeneous, right? And existing unequal power relationships due to inequities that exist in our society can undermine the voices and needs of those who are most impacted. That's why in my everyday practice as a DI practitioner, I often try to ask myself, who is the quietest voice in here? What makes them feel not comfortable speaking up, right? For example, but and I also want to say that we cannot be perfect. Like, for example, today's webinar, it is in English. And so people whose first language is not English or who have limited English proficiency might not be able to fully participate, like those who feel comfortable with the language English, right? So it won't be perfect. It will never be perfect, but just being aware of those imperfections is a step up, right? And on the right, I have this visualization of a social network that depicts friendships within a classroom. The black dot representing male students, the white dot representing female students. Can anyone tell me in the chat, like, did you notice some pattern that's going on? Very good. No non-binary representation. Everyone's clustered together. We stick with people who are like us. People forming relationship who are like them, or people forming relationship with people who they think are like them. One male student left out. Very good observation. One outlier, right? And so, like, you can already see, right? There are so many layers in this visual, right? There is this pattern where people tend to cluster with people who they think are like them. There is this assumption by whoever researcher that put out this research out there to not include non-binary people. So my point being that community is uneven. Community is unequal. Just because you're in a community doesn't mean that it is diverse, that you're doing inclusive work, if that makes sense. Just by reaching out to community that is not like you doesn't automatically means that you are doing great work, that you're making a positive impact, right? Yes, men and women. I often say that people are people. Stop referring people to as objects, right? So there are a lot of things that we need to learn and to be better. All right, getting back to the term intentionality. So having good intention doesn't mean that you're having intentionality. It's two different things. So what is intentionality? To me, intentionality is acting in alignment with your core values, right? And because all of us are unique individuals and unique human beings, we might have different core values, and that's fine. That's diversity. Our core values are often linked to our lived experience. For me, having so many marginalized identities make me feel that fairness, equity, justice, like those kind of concepts really resonate with me. And I try to align these core values to my day-to-day practices as a person and also in my work that I do. And it's okay if you have a different set of core values. Your core values might be family, it might be collaboration, it might be health, it might be different things. So again, going back to the first point about humility, it is really, really important that we do a lot of self-reflection, because just like community that is ever-changing, we as people are also ever-changing, right? So it's important to carve out time to reflect on your own and what your core values are. So you're making sure that when you're doing something, you're doing it in alignment with the core values, either with yourself or with the organization that you are working with, right? So I have these two different scenarios on the left, and then another scenario on the right, right? So from what I see from my vantage point, I see a lot of people doing community engagement, like the depiction on the left, right? That they think that by having good intention, that we feel good about ourselves, that I am a good person, of course, I'm going to do something good, right? And so they give resources and services to marginalized community. And in return, sometimes they expect accolades, reciprocity, and when they don't get those, they feel like something is missing, right? Versus on the right with intentionality, you ask yourself what your core values are. To me, it is inclusion and equity, right? And then you ask yourselves, how do you do it? And how and why. And I see your question, Sean. I'm gonna get to that. Okay, so how and why, and then you engage with, when you start the process of community engagement, you engage with the community by asking them what they mean by inclusion and equity as well, right? Just like this webinar, I'm trying to also integrate my core values when I'm doing this webinar, is how do we make sure that those who are participating have a voice, right? And then you think about what kind of resources, what kind of services I want to put together with this community, so then we can make equitable impact, we can have equitable outcomes. So when Sean asked about what equitable outcome is, it really depends, right? So you can, to me, it is both subjective and objective. Subjective meaning that to me, it is important to ask what the community wants, how the community define equitable outcomes mean, and take those feedback into consideration when thinking about how we want to measure outcome. And it's also important to think about how do we measure outcome from a social scientific point of view. I'm professionally trained as a social scientist, so I really like to use survey and other like focus groups, interviews, and other scientific methods to kind of gather feedback and data, and also compare with existing data like census, right? So I give you a very quick example. This morning when I was at the White House Initiative for the Asian American and Native Hawaiian Pacific Islanders Economic Summit, they talk about the fact that Philadelphia is 8% Asian American, but only less than 1% of philanthropic dollars goes to Asian American nonprofits, right? So those would be some objective measures that would measure ourselves against what should be equitable outcomes. But to me, that's a good measure, but then that's not good enough, because again, you need to go back to the community and ask them what equitable outcomes mean to them, because we might want to do something that we think would be helpful, but then if the community is telling you this is not what we need, so why are we doing this, right? So to me, I think it is important to have those core value guide you towards what you're doing, instead of just imagining that, okay, we're doing good work because we're engaging with marginalized community, right? And we're going to go back to it when I'm giving some example at the end. So third ingredient, vulnerability. I'm just checking the time here real quick. Okay, we're good. Okay, so to me, vulnerability is so important because there is no equity and when we're not willing to take risks. The idea of inequity is that something is not equitable, right? And I hope we can all agree that we live in an inequitable society, right? So in order to advance equity, we need to make change. We need to do things differently. And I like to use this analogy of a conveyor belt, right? If we think about the conveyor belt, right? And if we already are all living in an inequitable society, we're all moving to the same direction of inequity. Changing things doesn't mean that we stop acting inequitably. It means that we need to go backwards, maybe leave the conveyor belt, do something different in order to, in a really cliche term, make the society better, right? So to me, it's all about taking risks. It's all about being willing to make mistakes, being able to admit that we make mistakes, and being able to accept that there are so much that we can still learn. So equity requires change because not changing means persistent inequity. Change requires vulnerability, that is uncertainty, risk, and exposure. I'm sure a lot of you here have heard about the work of Dr. Brene Brown. I'm just going to quote her here really quickly. When the culture of any organization mandates that it is more important to protect the reputation of a system and those empowered than it is to protect the basic human dignity of the individuals who serve that system or who are served by that system, you can be certain that shame is systemic, that money is the driving ethics, and that the accountability is all but dead, right? So it is, so moving towards about how we can use the idea of vulnerability to build trust during our community engagement process. Here are a few do's and don'ts, right? Do ask to understand. Do prepare to not have all the answers, and do ask yourself, do ask for what you need, right? Sometimes we're so afraid to show that vulnerability, we don't ask for what we need. And to me, asking for what you need is one of the best way to build trusts. And in my experience in community partnership and just building partnerships and relationships with people in a community and in different industries, it is so helpful to ask somebody to teach you something, ask for what you need. That's how we start partnership. We cannot start partnership by pretending that we have all the answers, we have all the resources, and we don't need help, right? And don't ask to solicit a desired response. Again, we live in a very diverse society. There is no one right way to respond to something. Do not make assumptions. Do not make assumptions about communities. Do not make assumptions about people. Do not make assumptions about organizations. Just don't make assumptions. I know it seems so easy said than done. And sometimes I also catch myself having some biases, right? So I would have some internal dialogue with myself. Esther, what did you just think? Why did you think that? You really need to stop thinking that. And do not try to maintain image at the expense of collaboration and innovation, because when we're able to make those creative partnership happens, we can all share resources and do things way more effectively and efficiently, and it is worth it to just admit that we don't understand something and we want to collaborate. All right, I'm just looking at the time here. Okay, so applying concepts in real life. So more on community engagement, and I'll give you one example that I know from my past experience later. Just really quickly, when we're thinking about community engagement, we ask ourselves what sort of core values that is guiding us to decide that community engagement is what we want to do. I'm going to repeat. Okay, so before you even start the process of community engagement, ask yourself, what is the core value in me and or in the organization that I work for? Propel me to make the decision that community engagement is something that we should pursue. I go into so many different organizations telling me that, oh, I want to do community engagement because that's what everyone else is doing. Or I go into a space where people say, oh, we need to fund more BIPOC organizations. And I ask, why? They say, oh, because everybody is doing it. That's why I'm doing it as well. That is not good enough. Because if your decision is not guided by something that is deeper than what is everyone else doing, you're not going to sustain this effort, and you're not going to be able to ask the right questions to make sure that we are all moving towards the same purpose, especially if you work for a relatively large organization. You need those core values to guide you through all the work you do and every decisions that you're going to make. And just doing what other people are doing is just not a good enough reason. So dig deep into your organization or into your core, depending on where you come from, right? I don't know exactly what line of work you do. It would be great if you can align your personal values with your organizational value. I understand that that is not the case most of the time, but in any way, it is important to ask those questions, right? So just put those three out there: collaboration, equity, health. right? If those are the three guiding principles and core values that you're working on, then the next thing is that why do I need to engage with the community, right? First of all, I want to collaborate with specific communities, so to share resources together, right? I care about equity, and because there's so much health disparities that I can see within my communities and in my city, and that's why I have to engage with community and pull them into the fold to share those resources, right? And I'm thinking about governments, like, and maybe funders, right, who might have resources to give, right, but they might not necessarily have the trust in the community to channel those resources to the right place or to the most hard to reach population, right? So then I think about, okay, so how do I bridge those communities, right? And how do I share these skills and resources in a way that is like, now that kind of go back to the cultural humility parts, right? Because if we're not humble, then we can just come into a space like, here are all the things that I think you all would need. Just trust me. And then if the community said, that's not what we need, and if you're not listening, then you're not really providing people what they actually need, then that is not achieving the purpose of, like, go back to collaboration, equity, and health, right? And then from that vantage point, we start to identify partners, right? Who would be the right partners that we should engage with to bring the right resources to the table and to reach the right population that we want to reach. And then we go back to say, who are we missing out? Who are we missing out, right? So what I love to do is that I like to, once I kickstart the process, I keep going back and reflecting, are we missing out somebody? Why are these group of people not talking? Why are they not applying to these grants or something like that? Then how do we make extra efforts to make sure we reach out to them, right? Because it's equity, right? Equity is not equality. Equality is that you give everybody the same thing. Equity is that you design different strategies and approaches to make sure everybody is reached out to and get and be able to have access to those resources, right? And you identify needs together, you address health issues that the community cares about. So it's always a feedback loop. I know that in reality, sometimes we cannot afford to have so many feedback loop. If you're planning for a big program or like a more long-term project, it might help to also build in those cycles where you can reflect and collect feedback and think about how to use those feedback in and apply them in the program. And hopefully, like the end result is that we get positive health outcomes that benefits communities, sustained partnership, right, and mitigating health disparity. And I'm going to be more precise about that. So I'm pretty new to the city government. I just started. This is my third month. Prior to that, I was in the nonprofit sector, and I was very engaged in the COVID-19 vaccine equity work, in particularly in the Asian American community. And at that time, there was a lot of when the vaccine first came out, I don't know if you remember, there was a lot of talk about like vaccine inequity, that people from marginalized communities were not getting vaccinated. And precisely in the Asian American community, there is a lot of language needs and issues around language access that was going on. And later on, because of different kinds of partnerships, we were able to push forward a really successful vaccine campaign. Ultimately, we vaccinated more than 5,000 people who have limited English proficiency in a community center. But then I don't know how many of you were immersed in that vaccine effort, but for those of you who might be more familiar, at one point that at least for Philadelphia, Asian became one of the most highly vaccinated population. While I was doing that work, first of all, we felt very proud that so many Asians got vaccinated. And then at the same time, I know for a fact that the ones that are most hard to reach, people who are undocumented, people who are new immigrants, people who have mobility issues, are not being reached. So even though we had a vaccination rate, I think at that time we were looking at over 90%, I know that we're not captured. That 10% that we have not reached were those who are most hard to reach, right? And at that time, I was thinking about all the funding coming from different levels of the government and also philanthropy. At that time, they were really gearing up to not funding Asian serving organizations for the right reasons, because when you look at, for example, the Black community in Philadelphia, they were not vaccinated enough. They were really, really under-vaccinated, and they needed all the resources that they could get to do the work. And I was thinking in my head, how do I make sure that I help, or the organization that I was working for could contribute to that effort of getting the Black community vaccinated, and at the same time get some funding for ourselves to really make that last push, to push forward those that are most hard to reach in our community, right? So I decided to reach out to another nonprofit that was serving the African and Caribbean immigrant communities in Southwest Philly. And I was like, let's partner up. Can we partner up? Because of course, it wasn't a cold email. We already kind of knew each other. And at that time, I identified that the organization that I was working for had really, we had a grant writer, which was a privilege, compared to a lot of smaller scale nonprofits. And so we had the strength, we had the resources and skills to do graphic design. We know how to write a report and things like that. And then we were looking at the other nonprofit. They didn't really have those skills, right? But what they really have was the strengths to do event planning. They have deep ties and connections locally in Southwest Philly, which is something that we didn't have, that kind of fulfill our needs to expand the services in a different geographic area in Philly, right? So we saw those, that we have strengths that each other need. And then at the same time, we were reaching out to government agencies like the public health departments, like Philly Counts, to provide those resources. And we also reach out to hospitals who really have expert knowledge around health, and we can depend on them to provide really accurate and really good quality information to us, so we don't have to scramble around to do research, right? Because research was not our forte. So we make sure that we reach out to those who are experts in doing research, or have those research in the hand, right, to spread accurate information. And to us, it was very purpose driven. It wasn't about hoarding more resources for a particular organization. It was really about, we have common goals. Our common goals is to get as many people to get the vaccine. And our goal is health equity and public health. We all have the same goal. How do we partner in such a way that we can share these skills and resources together, right? So what came out was a beautiful partnership. We held a beautiful event at Malcolm X Park last summer, and people still talked about it. I know some of you were there. I saw some of your names there. We had different government agencies. We had a local hospital joining us, doing all sorts of different screening work. They were doing hepatitis B screening. There was information about mental health, domestic violence, health issues that really are affecting both communities. And that was great. And I know that even now I transitioned to the government. I know that partnership continue to sustain, because it's purpose driven. It's not just about me. It's not just about the nonprofit. It's about the common good, and something that all these partners care about, right? So last slide, and I really love this. I kind of plug it in last minute at the end, and when I was looking for materials that would fit this presentation, I really like this analogy of egocentric network versus eco-centric network, right? Because when you put cultural humility, intentionality, and vulnerability into your work of doing community engagement, ultimately you want to build an eco-centric network, right? A network of people and organizations that are aligned around a common purpose, right? So then you can transcend those relationships from a place of transactional to purposeful, right? And meaningful, something that we can all feel good about, something we can all feel proud about, right? And it's not just about me, it's about we did these great things together, right? So from transactional to, it says general, but I would say meaningful, right? And then again, it is multi-hub network. I've seen so many people would go into a community that they're not really familiar with, and they identify one single community leader. That is a recipe for failure. Because like I said in my earlier slide, in every single communities, there are always different identities that are simultaneously existing and ever changing. So there is no one person that can represent the entire community. So when you do community engagement, make sure you have multiple contact persons, multiple contact points. Consider their identities. I know identities is not everything, but sometimes it helps. Are you only talking to leaders who are men? Are you only talking to leaders who are Christian? Are you only talking to leaders who are second generation immigrants? Are you only talking to leaders who speak English well, right? So ask yourself those questions and reflect whether or not your community engagement approach is truly, truly inclusive. And thinking about, again, because it's purpose driven, it is not about your personal influence. Because one day, no matter how driven we are, we can't do everything by ourselves. We're not do one thing forever. Every leader need to think about legacy. So you want to make a collective impact. You want to plant the seed so other people can pick up your work and continue to do it and continue to spread it, right? So it's not about your personal connection. It's about weaving those networks, lift people up, don't always delegate, right? Ask for help, right? So sometimes I feel like leaders are hoarding all these power, not so much because they are bad people, but they just don't want to show that vulnerability. They want to appear that they have all the answers, so they don't ask for help. So when you don't ask for help, you're making your network really limited and isolated, and you're not weaving those networks in ways that you can. And that's why when you are able to weave those networks, you will see that your networks become relatively diverse, and stakeholding in relations to purpose instead of in relation to you as a person, or in relations to the hub that hold most of the power. So that is all that I've got, and I'll go to the Q&A.
Thank you for a wonderful presentation, Esther. We do have a few questions in the Q&A, and I would like to encourage you all, if you have any questions, to please put them in the Q&A section. And if you, by any chance, put them in the chat box, we will try to make sure that we see them. So our first question says, are there any tips for people who want to genuinely serve communities that don't exactly look like or share identities with them. For example, being a non-POC person who is considered an outsider that sees needs in POC communities and genuinely want to engage and help.
First of all, it's not easy. So I understand that it is not easy. Secondly, I would say that it is helpful to understand what power you hold, right? As a non-POC person, as a white person, right? Not to say that, I know there is a lot of talk around like privilege, and there are some negative feelings that are being attached to the word privilege. So I like to use the word power more, because everybody has power. Everybody has power. You might be the most junior person in your organization, but you might know information that other people don't know. I might be a woman, so compared to men, I don't hold as much hegemonic power like this, because our world is designed mostly for men by men, right? But I do have power to understand women more, right? So as a white person, it is important to understand what kind of power a white person hold in any given space, right? If you're moving into a space where is majority are non-white, then you need to be aware that these people probably treat you better because we're so socialized. Again, it's not any individual's fault. It is systemic, right? So like from a young age, like people who are people of color, we are socialized to cater to white comforts. And sometimes I know, so it's not just the responsibility of the white person to break that curse, it's also the responsibility of everybody in the room to break that curse, right? So I would say to understand your power, and make sure that you don't center on yourself. Don't make it about you. If you feel uncomfortable, it's not about you. Take a back seat, listen. Don't feel so compelled to speak. Don't feel like you need to provide a solution or an answer. Sometimes it's okay to just sit back, relax, and take a back seat and show up for people. Show up even when you're not at the center of attention, right? So like, for example, like today I'm the speaker, everybody's listening to me talk. But I show up to numerous events. Like for example, I want to show up for the Black community. There are so many times I just show up and I say absolutely nothing. I just sat there and I just attended the event. And that is most of the work. That is most of the work. We just need you to show up and don't talk, And sometimes I learn, like I just show up. I don't talk, That's okay.
Thank you for that answer. Suzanne asked a question, and it was back when you were talking about vulnerability. And she says, but doesn't being vulnerable require a safe space? And I had some thoughts about that.
I like that
also, but I would like to hear what you would have to say.
Yes, being vulnerable requires a safe space. So I would say check with yourself. I push myself to speak even when my voice shakes, right? But it also depends, like someday I have more mental energy to do that, to be the advocate, to speak, to be vulnerable. Someday I just have no capacity and I just want to lay down on the couch. That's fine, And so like I would say, do not share your vulnerability at the expense of your personal well-being, if that makes sense, right? But if you feel like you are in a place where you have that energy to share and to be that advocate and to be that voice and to be that brave person, do that. Because especially if you hold a marginalized identities, what you do helps other people who have a shared identity so much, just by seeing a person just like them to be able to show their vulnerability, to be honest, right? So I am a big proponent of self-care. I know this like an overused term. I almost don't like this term anymore, but I'm just like to take care of myself, right? Because if I am so burnt out, or if I don't have any energy to spare, how do I show up with vulnerability? I can't, and that's not helpful, right? So when you find yourself in that place where you feel like you don't have anything to spare anymore, then it's time to rest.
I'd agree. Like, I think when we talk about vulnerability, we always forget to talk about the safety aspect. But there's another part of it that I also think that we sometimes forget, and is like you said, like sometimes you'll speak even when your voice shakes, and it's the courage part.
Mm-hmm.
Fear will stop us from doing a lot of things. And sometimes when you are trying to be vulnerable, there's a fear that you won't be accepted.
Yes.
And that's the thing that will stop us. So it also requires not only a safe space, but it also requires a certain amount of courage also. So.
Yeah, and just also thinking about harm, right? If you're put in a position where you experience harm, and it's so important that you remove yourself from harm. Nobody deserves to be harmed, you know.
Right.
But then it's always a gamble. It takes risks. Like I can't guarantee that every space you're gonna walk into is gonna be a safe space. Most likely not. So yeah, but when something is harming you, make sure like you take a step back and take care of yourself first.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
Someone asked this question. What if we all do not agree that we live in an inequitable society? How does one ensure that this isn't socialism?
Can you read me the question one more time?
What if we all do not agree that we live in an inequitable society? How does one ensure that this isn't socialism?
Okay. What if we all don't agree that we live in an inequitable society? So I would flip the question. So we think that we all live in an equitable society, then that's great. Like if we live in an equitable society, then I don't think we need to engage in these kind of conversation. But unfortunately, I mean, statistics and social sciences showed us that our society is not equitable. And I can use a very simple example. The fact that we're using English for this webinar means that those who don't speak English cannot access this information, right? The fact that we might not have, do we have caption today?
Yep, we do
we
have
do.
caption.
Okay, all right, okay.
And if you need to, you can actually change the language of the caption nowadays in Zoom. They updated that.
Yeah, technology is amazing. But what I'm saying is that even like in every building, right? If you are someone who are on wheelchair, you know, there are a lot of buildings you can't go into. And if you really, really pay attention and look around you, you will see a lot of inequities in our society. And I would invite those who don't see inequities to start to notice the experiences of those whose everyday life means that they have to deal with those inequities every day. I remember when at one point I was teaching in a college classroom, right? And I identify as an immigrant. English is my second language, and when I came to the United States when I was 19 years old, my English was so bad that I felt so nervous to order a McDonald's meal. I just didn't know what to say, right? And then I remember at one point I was teaching about social inequalities in a college classroom, and I had a student who came to me to say that they feel really uncomfortable that we're I don't know why we were talking about hip hop, but we were talking about hip hop in class, and then we just kept talking about hip hop, right? So this student of mine growing up listening to country music said that I don't know anything about hip hop. I feel so uncomfortable. I feel like I'm gonna drop this class, you know? And then I was like, please, please, please stay in this class. I said, because as an immigrant who didn't speak English, I felt uncomfortable everywhere I go. And look at you, you only felt uncomfortable in this classroom. So can you bear with us and stay in this class so you learn more about the different experiences that everyone has, and then you will start to see the inequity. So that's the answer to this question.
Thank you. Elise asks, language barriers are always a tough aspect to overcome. Do you have any ideas to help with this challenge? Personally, I've made it a point to hire people who are bilingual and multilingual.
First of all, it is very tough, and we talk about this even this morning. There is you can never do it perfectly, because like I'm thinking about like the Asian community, there are just so many different languages that need to be covered. It's almost it's just really, it's just not possible to do it perfectly, right? But even just introducing the idea of language access into this kind of dialogue, I think is a great start. And I think I heard from my colleague also thinking about, you know, can we pay people who are bilingual, who speak multiple languages more, because it is an asset, right? And I think we have gone so far. I remember when I was, when I first immigrated to the United States, like being able to speak a different language was something that I needed to hide. But now it's something that is seen as an asset in the workplace. And I cannot imagine, like even like 5 years ago, I would not be able to imagine that being able to speak another language is being viewed as an asset. So we have progressed in a long, big way. So we should feel proud of ourselves. We can't do it perfectly, but I would say that let's just keep the conversation going, keep the dialogue open, you know. And I would also say that something that I really promote is that when you think about providing language access, it's not just about providing the resources, but also thinking about how do we reach that group of people who speak that particular languages, right? So for a lot of the events, I would see that there are language support, right? For example, for Spanish, right? But there is not a specific effort to reach Spanish-speaking population to come to the events, right? So then it becomes very, for lack of a better word, kind of performative, because like, oh, we have language support here, but there is 0 person who speak Spanish. So why are we having language support here, right? So make sure that the need is matched up with the resources, right? Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Now we have some questions coming off of questions that were posed earlier. Angela was wondering, is are we as a society starting to raise our children to stop the catering to others based on the color of their skin, based off of what you had said just a few minutes ago when you answered another question? She wanted to know if you feel like that is starting to change or shift in our society now.
I remember, I'm hopeful. I'm a very optimistic person. I have a 6-year-old, and I do hope that our society is getting better and better. But there are so many forces that shape the way we think about race in our country. And media and stereotypes are still very, very powerful. It's still very, very powerful. So I don't think racism is going to disappear in my lifetime. It's an intergenerational effort. I think media, I think political power, economic power, we're still looking at the racial wealth gap is bigger than before. It's getting bigger. It's not getting smaller. So in a lot of very structural ways, right? And I look at a city like Philadelphia, we are very segregated. And I look at how wealth is distributed so disproportionately. We have a long way to go, right? So then we don't have to look at the realities, and the realities give us impression about how people with different skin colors have different circumstances that they have to face. So it's both structural and it's also cultural. Like those stereotypes, like I said, is powerful. We need to really check with ourselves and reflect on our own biases. We're all biased.
Mhm.
I am biased, because we're human. We're not perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. So going back to the question off of vulnerability, what is the difference between a safe space and a brave place to face vulnerability?
I know people like to talk about the term brave space. I personally like the term safe space better, because I cannot demand people to be brave. I feel like I can demand myself to be brave, but I cannot ask other people to be brave. That kind of goes back to the previous question about how do we show vulnerability when we can ensure that we have a safe space, right? So around safe space, I have a lot of thoughts, and if I'm the curator of that space, I think there are a lot of things we can do to ensure that the space that we are creating is safe. That includes like having really explicit ground rules of what is tolerable, what is not tolerable, right? And making sure that we are doing no harm. I see a lot of health people here, do no harm is the very baseline of a safe space, right? And when we make a mistake, move on, apologize, move on, and change our behavior. And I think safe space is so much easier to develop. I do not think that brave space is impossible, but I think in order to create a brave space, I need to go into a space and really making sure that people feel safe first. I cannot demand people to be brave if they can't even feel safe, right? So when I know that, okay, we're in a safe space now, can we encourage people to be brave, right? So I would say that safe space and then brave space.
Thank you for that. Jabaya asks, how do you identify false humility in yourself?
It takes a lot of reflection, and sometimes I do catch myself practicing false humility too, right? And when I do that, I notice that usually is when I don't give myself enough humility and acceptance, right? Because I'm feeling insecure, right? Maybe I walk into a space where I feel insecure for whatever reason, or I feel like I need to up my game, or I need to like project a certain image in front of people. Then I start to act in a way that is egocentric instead of ecocentric, right? That I am making it about myself. And I do catch myself doing that. And as I speak, I'm like, am I doing it now? I'm like thinking in my head too, right? It's so easy to like be a speaker of a webinar where everybody's listening to you, think that I have all the answers, right? And I don't. And sometimes I'm not humble all the time. I act differently professionally versus at home.
Right.
Sometimes, my 6-year-old would like speak in a way that's not so respectful to my partner. I'm like, where did she learn it from? I was like, I think she learned it from me. I really need to, yeah. So just a lot of reflection and a lot of just grace for myself, right? Extending grace, not just for other people, but for myself. I think that helps ground me to be truly humble. Yeah.
Okay, and I think this is going to be our last question. I hope I pronounced this correctly. Zhang Zhu asks if immigrants, non-English speaking employees may get bullied, harassed by employer or coworkers, how can you help them ensure they have rights and should be equally treated?
This is a tough question because every organization have different structure and different policy and procedure, you know, and different HR processes. I would say to find what first of all, to learn what the resources that are already existing around you, that are available to you first, right? And if you don't know, try to find someone who's safe to talk to identify those resources. And at the same time, if the resources are not there, then you really need to, if you need to elevate an issues, find the people who are safe again, and someone who care about the issues to elevate those issues for you. And yes, contact EEOC, yes, Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and just find those resources. And I would say that the legal system is very minimal. It covers a very minimum thing, and then sometimes it's hard to prove certain things, but I would say protect your mental health. To me, my mental health is always more important than a job. Nothing is worth sacrificing my own mental health. So check with yourself about what you can and cannot tolerate. Yeah.
Thank you, Esther. And I'm going to turn it over to Nancy to close us out.
Thank you, Jamal. That was great. The questions were amazing, and so thank you for all of that. I'm almost out of lack for words, and I've got them. I know what to say, but I am just a little bit overwhelmed with pride in Esther. I have had the opportunity to know her, and in the years that I've known her, watch her develop into this absolutely amazing human being. And I'm sitting watching her sitting in her city hall office and thinking, I wonder if maybe, you know, one day she'll be our next mayor. Could be, you never know. And I'm so proud of it. And I'm grateful for all of you that were here today and I had the opportunity to listen and learn from her. And I know we're all going to take this with us as we move forward in our lives. And I'm just so excited that we had the opportunity to bring Esther to you. And now I want you all to know that there are certificates of attendance. I put the links in. I'll put them in an email that goes out to everybody in the next couple of days if you're having trouble. Also, the evaluations are equally as important, especially to us here at PA Care. They're why we decided to have Esther today. They're why we make the decisions to move in the directions that we do with the topics. So we listen, I listen, and it's important what you have to tell us. So I thank you for completing the evaluation. And those evaluations are bringing us into February, is Black History Month. Our next presentation is Structural Racism in Psychiatric Practice, a Call for Sustained Change by Dr. Rachel Talley, MD. She's an assistant professor of clinical psychiatry in the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Pennsylvania. She is also a practicing psychiatrist specializing in working with children. That will be Friday, not Thursday, Friday, February 10th from 2:30 to 4. And we look forward to having you all join us. I'm gonna throw that link into, and that again too will also be an email that goes out to everybody. So while we still have a couple of minutes, well, actually, yeah, we have 2 minutes. Esther, is there anything else that you'd like to add or say as we close out?
I just want to say thank you to you, Nancy, and Jamal, who just left.
I forgot to let everyone know.
Yes, so thank you so much for the invitations. Thank you so much for the facilitation. Jamal's not here, but thank you to Jamal. And I see some familiar names here, friends, colleagues, so much love and good energy. Thanks so much. It's been a very hectic week for me, but this is amazing. Thank you so much.
Yay, I like that. The chat has suddenly just blown up, and I can't even read fast enough to get through all of it. But it's clear that everybody is thrilled to be here. Thinks you're great, enjoyed the presentation, and is looking for more. And I thank everybody who was here. Thank you again, Esther. You are it's an honor tonight. And I look forward to working with you again in the future and being your ally.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thanks, everyone.